The following is an encore presentation of Everything Everywhere Daily.
One of the most important inventions in human history was the bow and arrow. A bow and arrow is a rather simple device, but it was a revolutionary advancement for humanity's ability to hunt and fight. Unlike many early human inventions, the bow and arrow have had an extremely long lifespan. For thousands of years, it remained virtually unchanged. That was until the last 100 years when this age-old device changed dramatically. Learn more about the history of the bow and arrow and how it changed the world on this episode of Everything Everywhere Daily. This episode is sponsored by Quince. Temperatures are dropping and the holidays will soon be upon us. This is when you want your wardrobe to just work. Stuff that looks sharp, feels good, and you'll actually reach for. That's why I go with Quince. I recently purchased a Mongolian cashmere sweater. At Quince, you can pick one up for $50, when you normally drop $200 or more for the same thing. They also have great denim pants and chinos, as well as fantastic down jackets, as well as wool and leather coats. By partnering directly with ethical factories and top artisans, Quince cuts out the middleman to deliver premium quality at half the cost of similar brands, and often even bigger discounts. Get your wardrobe sorted out and your gift list handled with Quince. Don't wait. Go to quince.com/daily for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. That's QUINCE.com/daily. Free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/daily. This episode is sponsored by Mint Mobile. You know, you don't have to let big wireless and your overpriced phone bill suck the joy out of the holidays this year. Because right now, all of Mint Mobile's unlimited plans are 50% off. You can get 3, 6, or 12 months of unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. It's their best deal of the year and makes it really easy for you to give your expensive wireless bill the Scrooge treatment. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. That's why I recommend Mint Mobile. Turn your expensive wireless present into a huge wireless savings future by switching to Mint. Shop Mint Unlimited plans at mintmobile.com/EED. That's mintmobile.com/EED. Limited time offer. Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month, $90 for 6-month, or $180 for 12-month plan required. $15 a month equivalent. Taxes and fees extra. Initial plan term only. Greater than 35 gigabytes may slow when network is busy. Capable device required. Availability, speed, and coverage varies. See mintmobile.com. There are many inventions and discoveries that I've covered on this podcast. Almost everything has been invented in about the last 10,000 years. Even the wheel, which seems like an incredibly simple device, can only be traced back about 5,500 years as far as its use as a transportation device. As far as we know, however, the bow and arrow goes back further than almost any other human invention that we have evidence for. A bow is a very simple device. A traditional bow consists of a long piece of wood that can bend. It must be able to bend, but not too much, and it also can't break. Each end of the bow is connected by a string, which would usually be made out of animal sinew or some sort of plant fiber. When the bow string is drawn back, it stores potential energy, which is transferred to the arrow upon release, converting it into kinetic energy, propelling it forward with great force. The bow and arrow was not the first projectile technology. Humans probably first began by throwing stones and later developed the spear. The spear was also a revolutionary tool and was probably invented several 100,000 years before the bow and arrow. The earliest evidence we have of spears goes back 400 to 500,000 years. There's evidence of chimpanzees using simple spears, which indicate that humans, or at least human ancestors, may have been using spears much, much earlier. While early spears were probably simply thrown, most early modern humans didn't throw spears like a javelin. They used a spear thrower known as an atlatl. An atlatl is a simple tool that serves as a lever to enhance the velocity and distance of a thrown spear or dart. It consists of a shaft with a handle on one end and a hook or socket on the other that grips the projectile. By extending the length of the thrower's arm, the atlatl enables the user to throw a spear with greater force and accuracy than could be achieved by the arm alone. This ancient hunting weapon was widely used across various cultures before the advent of the bow and arrow. The bow and arrow represented a significant upgrade over the spear and atlatl for several reasons, particularly in terms of range, rate of fire, and versatility. The bow can store more energy in its elastic limbs than the human arm or the atlatl can in throwing motion. This allowed arrows to fly further than spears. Additionally, arrows can be crafted to fly with better aerodynamics than spears, making them more accurate over longer distances. Archers can load and fire arrows more quickly than an atlatl user can load and launch spears. This rapid rate of fire makes bows particularly effective in sustained combat and hunting scenarios, allowing archers to release multiple arrows in the time it takes to prepare and throw a single spear with an atlatl. Arrows are lighter and more compact than spears, making them easier to carry in large numbers. A quiver can hold many arrows, providing a warrior or a hunter with ample ammunition, whereas carrying multiple spears is much more cumbersome. The earliest known evidence of arrows dates back about 70,000 years. The items, which are assumed to be bone arrowheads, were found in the Sibutu cave in South Africa. One of the problems with bows and arrows and the archaeological record is that most of what makes up a bow or an arrow are organic, and organic material doesn't preserve well. The only thing we can really find are the hard arrowheads, which were made out of bone or stone. And it's also interesting to note that the dating of the arrowheads found in South Africa date back to approximately the same time as the human diaspora out of Africa, which resulted in modern human beings. The earliest non-African evidence of arrows was found in Sri Lanka, which date back about 48,000 years. The next major finds are dated about 12 to 10,000 years ago in Europe. And this period is extremely important in human history as it roughly marks the end of the last ice age and the development of human settlements and civilization. It's believed that by this time, bows and arrows were in use on every continent on Earth except for Australia. During this period, give or take a few thousand years, images of bows and arrows began appearing in cave paintings. What isn't known is if the bow and arrow was a technology passed down by early humans for tens of thousands of years, or if it was independently discovered around the world like agriculture. As more people moved towards sedentary agriculture, bows and arrows became used more for warfare instead of hunting. While there were small changes to the design of bows and arrows, for the most part, there was very little change in the basic design of bows and arrows for thousands of years. One of the first major changes to the bow took place around 2000 BC in Central Asia. It was here that we find the first evidence of the composite bow. A composite bow is a traditional bow made from multiple materials, typically wood, horn, and sinew, laminated together to utilize the distinct mechanical properties of each material. The central wooden frame provides the structure, the horn on the belly, that being the side facing the archer, compresses, while the sinew on the back, the side facing away from the archer, stretches when the bow is drawn. This combination allows the bow to store a greater amount of energy more efficiently than a bow made from a single material. Composite bow technology spread to civilizations that had contact with the steppe nomads, including China and Persia, but there was also evidence of use in Egypt, Greece, and Assyria. With the advent of the Iron Age around 1200 BC, you saw the introduction of iron-tipped arrows. These arrowheads gave arrows more penetrating power, allowing them to more easily pass through leather and bronze armor. Another major innovation was the creation of the crossbow. Crossbows are horizontally held with stronger limbs and a drawstring, which can be locked in place and released with a trigger. First developed in China around the year 600 BC, it had several improvements on the normal bow. It could hold more energy in its limbs, which allowed for greater penetrating power. The string could be locked after the limbs were pulled back, meaning that the wielder didn't have to hold the stress of the bowstring. It was also very simple to use, which meant less training was required to operate it. The downside was that the rate of fire of a crossbow was much less than that of a trained archer using a bow. Crossbows were extremely popular in China and later in other parts of Asia for centuries. There were some limited references to crossbows in Greece and Rome, but they were never widely used. Crossbows didn't appear again in Europe until about the year 1000. Here they found a similar use to what they had been in ancient China. They allowed for unskilled operators and had greater penetrating power. The Middle Ages also saw the rise of the longbow. I've previously done an entire episode on the longbow, but suffice it to say the longbow was basically a much larger bow which had much heavier draw weights. Longbows first appeared about 2,500 to 2,000 years ago, but they never really became a strategic weapon until the Middle Ages in England. Like the crossbow, the longbow was very powerful. It could send an arrow a much greater distance, and it had better penetrating power. Unlike the crossbow, it was more accurate and could fire faster. The downside was that it required a highly skilled archer to use a longbow properly. England was able to exploit longbows by creating an entire culture surrounding longbows and archery. Every village in England had to engage in archery practice, so there would be a population of trained longbow archers that were available. Bows and arrows began to fall out of favor with the advent of firearms in the 16th century. Firearms gained prominence over bows and arrows primarily due to their greater lethality, ease of use, and effectiveness in a variety of conditions. Firearms can deliver more powerful and penetrating shots, increasing their lethality even against armored targets. They also require less physical strength and skill to operate effectively, enabling quicker training of forces. Firearms are also more reliable across different environmental conditions, as moisture and temperature changes less significantly affected their performance compared to bows, whose strings and wooden components can be sensitive to weather. Together, these advantages led to firearms replacing bows as the dominant ranged weapon in both military and hunting applications by the end of the 16th century. Despite the rise of firearms, bows and arrows never went away completely. There was still limited use in warfare and hunting in places like Japan and North America. But eventually, as firearms caught on even in these places, archery became an activity primarily for sport. In 1900, archery had its debut at the Summer Olympics in Paris, and in 1904, women's archery and team archery were both introduced. The 20th century saw many advances in material sciences that applied to bows and arrows. Fiberglass bows were introduced, as were hollow aluminum arrows. The primary advantage of fiberglass is its durability and resistance to environmental factors such as humidity and temperature fluctuations, which can adversely affect traditional wood bows. Fiberglass is also impervious to warping and cracking, maintaining its integrity and performance over time without requiring extensive maintenance. And furthermore, fiberglass is also really cheap. Aluminum arrow shafts were both light and strong compared to wood and could be manufactured to be almost perfectly straight. Hunters also began to use high-performance arrowheads that were literally razor blades. Perhaps the greatest 20th century innovation in bows, and one of the biggest innovations in the history of the bow, took place in the 1960s. An American inventor named Hollis Wilbur Allen introduced a system of pulleys and cables known as cams at the end of bow limbs. This became known as a compound bow. These cams allowed for a feature known as let-off, where the peak draw weight decreased significantly at full draw, making it easier for the archer to aim with greater control and less physical strain. This mechanical advantage allows archers to hold a drawn bow for longer periods without tiring, thereby improving accuracy. Additionally, the design of the compound bow makes it more energy efficient than traditional recurve bows, translating to higher arrow speeds and flatter trajectories for improved accuracy at longer distances. Today, compound bows are the most popular type of bow for hunting and recreational use, but they're still not allowed in Olympic competition. However, there is talk of adding a compound bow event to the archery competition in 2028 in Los Angeles or in 2032 in Brisbane. When you see a modern archery competition, it can look like an incredibly technical affair. Modern bows have sights, including sometimes laser sights, stabilizer bars, and a host of other small additions, all attached to a bow made out of highly advanced materials. Yet, for all the advancements in bows and arrows, they're fundamentally just modern versions of the same tool developed over 70,000 years ago by our ancestors in Africa. The executive producer of Everything Everywhere Daily is Charles Daniel. The associate producers are Austin Oetken and Cameron Kieffer. My big thanks go to everyone who supports the show over on Patreon. Your support helps make this podcast possible. And I also want to remind everyone about the community groups on Facebook and Discord. That's where everything happens that's outside the podcast. And links to those are available in the show notes. As always, if you leave a review on any major podcast app or in the above community groups, you too can have it read on the show.